Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And I really appreciated all of your testimony. Clearly, we have a lot of work to do to try to figure out how to price the cost of climate change into things. And I'm going to start with Mr. Karsner. Our flood insurance program that the chairman just talked about attempts to try to price risk. And your testimony spoke right to that about how we can use data and things to price it better. Can you talk about how 3D mapping and other data that's available today could make the flood insurance program work better at predicting and then helping us as we figure out how to both adapt and mitigate and understand the cost of the effects of climate change?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, I think flood insurance is top of the perils with immediacy that we have to face and with a linkage to monetary and macro risk, and that was the uniform agreement up here. Of course, insurance cuts through everything. Everyone has insurance for home, for business, for transportation. And what I've been told by the executives across the industry is they cannot have in a single year Houston, Miami, and San Juan, Puerto Rico go down in this way with bleeding balance sheets. So it's imperative to them to develop new tools of risk management because they're operating on very old modeled inputs and very, I'd almost call them ancient at this point, legacy flood maps. Now, it's an intransigent tug of war to get those maps moved because it affects people's property values, of course. But devoid of that sort of behavioral reality, you know, we have plenty of eyes in the sky, satellites, submersibles, things that float, things that fly, innumerable ways to capture new data with great precision that is far better to predictive analytics and visualization of what is happening in our floodplains. And they reveal something entirely different. It's not only that nature is dynamic and adaptive and evolves, so the maps would be the same even if we were using the same methodology, but with the level of compute that we currently have available, you know, what we know about the inaccuracies is troublesome. You have some insurers who have to rebuild the same suburban home in a Meyerland suburb in Houston within a decade 3 times, a $500,000 home built in the exact same place because the model will say, as a 100-year floodplain, if it floods 3 times, it's 300 years to the next event. Models actually say this, and our insurance industry actually acts on this. So having a much more dynamic, iterative relationship with the available high-performance computing capacity and machine learning and modeling is something that we're intensively working on, and it's something that the insurance agencies and the finance industry for gauging their property asset valuations are absorbing, and we'd be happy to work with the Congress on this.
And at the risk of embarrassing myself and you, I will ask you, in a 3D environment, where does water always flow?
Downhill. To
the lowest point. Mm-hmm. So 3D maps are very important toward making our flood insurance program more effective, and I think it's something that we have to transition to very, very fast. Mr. Powell, you talked a lot about our renewable energy and the things we've already done and the strides we've taken. Can you talk a little bit about what battery technology can mean and why the federal government should invest, although it's outside the jurisdiction of this committee, should invest in battery storage technology and what it can mean to renewable energy and its ability to actually be more impactful in our power grid?
Sure. First, let me thank you for your leadership in battery storage innovation with your co-sponsorship of the BEST Act, as well as the Use It Act on advanced carbon innovation technology. Storage is essential to smooth out the intermittency of existing intermittent wind and solar technologies. And frankly, it's important for other technologies as well. For a baseload technology like nuclear energy that's actually better if it runs all the time, it may be nice to have storage attached to that to add flexibility and improve the economics of that technology. Today, we have a very competitive technology in lithium-ion batteries for short-duration energy storage, but where we struggle is for longer duration storage, whether that's from one day to another or 1 week to another, or eventually one season to another. If we think about a grid that's going to have a very high percentage of renewables, 80% or more, that would require batteries that might only charge and discharge 1 time a year, and that would be technologies that we really haven't started to scratch the surface of yet.
Great. And one follow-up question for you, Mr. Powell. So a lot of people talked about reducing our carbon footprint. I totally agree. Another piece that people don't talk enough about is negative emissions technology. Negative emissions technology can be plants, but there are things you can put on plants to make them more effectively pull carbon out of the environment and put oxygen into the environment. How important is that toward a balance?
It's extremely important. I think in the future we'll think about not zero emissions, but net zero.
I think that's a really important point out of this hearing, and it's something not enough people talk about. It's about a balance. It's about a net. It's not about just going to zero. So I think that's a really important point that I hope we all remember out of this hearing. Thank you very much.
The Use It legislation establishes an X prize for that technology, which is why it's a very important piece of legislation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.